Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And tonight we have a nice kind of a double header for you. Paula Munier is here with her brand new book, The Hiding Place. I'm not sure if you can see it, but we have a dwindling number of autographed copies here. And I'll go ahead and put a link up in the comments field for those of you watching on Facebook, which will be all of you. And then Margaret Mizushima is going to be doing the heavy lifting with the program today. We're really grateful to have her join us. And her latest book is called Hanging Falls, and we still have a handful of signed copies left. But we've just heard the word on the street that she has a new book coming in September. And so we were just talking about, possibly booking an event. So anyway, for those of you watching, I will be moderating the comments field. So if you have questions for Paula or Margaret or Barbara, just go ahead and type them in and I'll appear magically towards the end of the program to ask some of your questions. So Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. Actually, I sort of feel like this is the Great Bizarro or something, where it's partly musician. We have Patrick and then he disappears off stage and then back he comes. Zoom is really an interesting technology. So Paula, you're at home in Maine, would that be right? Or New Hampshire, sorry, Vermont. I'll get there, Vermont.
Yes.
Right. And Margaret, you're in Colorado, and I'm here in my home in Scottsdale. I'm really delighted to remember now, took a minute, Paula's at home in Vermont, which is the home to one of my all-time favorite authors, Archer Mayer, a man whose books I have read from day one. I'm delighted that he's going to have a new book in September, and I collect them. So it'll be almost everything I know about Vermont, I've learned from Archer, but now thanks to Paula, I am better versed in the Granite. Is it the Granite State or the Green Mountain State?
Green Mountain State, yes.
Okay, New Hampshire is the Grant, proving that I grew up in Chicago and excuse me, went west and am somewhat shaky there on New England. So what's Colorado called, Margaret?
Well, we are the Columbine State.
Oh, okay.
Columbine's state flower.
The state flower. And to be honest, I'm trying to remember what Arizona is. The Sunshine State, the Copper State.
Sunshine State sounds about right, doesn't it?
Well, it does today since it's 90-something out here. So, this is a time of year when we have these wild disparities in weather. We have the air conditioning on. Paula probably has the fire on. It's just one of those great things. But anyway, part of the fun today is that both these series, Margaret's Timber Creek Mysteries and Paula's wonderful books, A Mercy Car Mystery Series, feature canines. Do you know how dumb I am? It took me a while to figure out why it was K-9. As the rank in the forces in which they serve. And one day I said it aloud for the first time. I said, "Oh, it's K9," and then I went, "Oh, it really is K9." So who knows? We all have blind spots. But in any case, what's really fun reading these books, aside from the wonderful human characters, is the working dogs, their backgrounds, the traumas they have endured, the skills that they have, and the way they bond with their person, and how they behave at crime scenes, because they are really active investigators. So I really love these. There was years ago, ladies, somebody who wrote, and she started quite late in life, and I think her first name was Virginia. Might have been Virginia Lanier. Does that ring a bell with you?
That's right.
And it was Bloodhounds, right?
Yeah. Bloodhounds. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then Jan Burke, I remember, wrote a standalone, the name of which escapes me, about cadaver dogs and how they are trained and how they work.
Yeah. Bones. One of my favorite of hers.
Bones. Okay. Well, I should have known that you guys would know the titles for all these books, but in any case,
I love that.
Yeah, it was really well done. And, proving again, the amazing sensitivity of dogs' noses. So, you think of them as drug sniffers and all, but they can detect cadavers. And of course, they have remarkable health uses today where, diabetics and people with epilepsy and other kinds of diseases can have companion dogs that are trained to help them and signal when they're in trouble. So it's just amazing animals all the way around. So Paula, tell us about your wonderful dog, because this is book 3 in the hiding place. So we haven't, in the Mercy Carr books, we haven't learned all there is to know yet.
No, I mean, in the Mercy Carr books, Elvis is her working dog, her military working dog. And what had happened was when she was in Afghanistan as an MP, her fiance was a dog handler, her fiance Martinez, and Elvis was his bomb sniffing dog. And they were in a battle in Afghanistan in which Martinez was killed and Mercy was wounded and Elvis was traumatized. And the last thing Martinez said to Mercy was, "Take care of my dog," because he was worried what would happen to him after his service was over, because sometimes these dogs, depending on if they're army dogs or defense contractor dogs, can end up in terrible shelters, abandoned and kill shelters. And so I had met some of these dogs at a Mission Canine Rescue fundraiser, and I fell in love with them. And so I made Elvis one of those dogs. And so Mercy and Elvis have both lost their man and their mission, and now they're home in Vermont, trying to work through their grief and trying to transition into civilian life.
So dogs can actually get PTSD the same way that people have. I thought that was a fascinating aspect of Elvis. And there's another dog that comes in, but let me turn this over to Margaret, who is actually our host, and let Margaret, you take over and tell us what you'd like us to know about Mercy and Elvis and all the rest of the cast.
All right, thank you so much. And first, I think I can speak for Paula and say that we are both honored to be here at the Poison Pen tonight. It's a fabulous bookstore. I'm sorry we're not there in person, but this is the next best thing. So thank you very much for hosting us tonight. And we're here to celebrate. We've shown this cover, but it's a beautiful cover. And here's Elvis right here in front. But we're celebrating this terrific book, so The Hiding Place. I am fascinated with Mercy Carr, just because I love these strong female heroines. And so, Paula, could you tell us just a little bit more about Mercy and what's the inspiration behind her? You've told us something about Elvis, but let's hear more about Mercy.
Well, Mercy is sort of my idea. As a writer, we always think to ourselves, what would my life have been like had I gone this way instead of that way? And I was raised in the military. My dad was a colonel. I was an Army brat. And I always thought, I was born a little too early to go to West Point, like all my, if I'd been a boy, right? Because I grew up with a lot of Army brats who were boys, and they had to pick their academy and go off to their military service. But as a girl, I didn't have to. And it wasn't until the year after I graduated from high school that they opened West Point to girls. And boy, I kind of dodged a bullet there, because I would have been a miserable serviceman, I think, service person. But I still wondered, what would it have been like if I had been, what would that, and I am always I have such a soft spot in my heart for the men and women of the military, having grown up with them and knowing so many of them and their service. So I thought, what would it be like to be an MP, a female MP? What would she experience? How would she be different? What would she have to do to survive? I know you're Maddie, and in Margaret's books, she has a former vet too. Her name is Maddie. And it's funny that both Maddie and Mercy have on the surface, they're very similar, but they have very different backstories. They had very different childhoods. They bring different skill sets to what amounts to the same job, although Maddie is law enforcement now. So I thought it was interesting, what would you do once your service is over? Then how do you make that transition? And I have seen in my own life with a lot of people I know that transition from military to civilian life can be difficult. And so I wanted to put Mercy in that transition and see how would she come back from Afghanistan, having lost Martinez, having lost her mission, how would she navigate the civilian world?
Very good, very good. Well, it is a fascinating story, and I've enjoyed watching it unfold over the past 3 books. So that is very great. And of course, Mercy has a love interest, even though it's tentative and she's a little unsure because she did lose the love of her life. Um, so that's Troy, the game warden.
Right.
Wildlife manager or game warden? Game warden?
In Vermont, they're game wardens.
Okay, we call them wildlife managers here. Well, we have actually both, but okay, very good. Could you tell us a little bit about Troy?
Well, I wanted Troy to be the sort of his voice in the story. So I love stories like Julia Spencer Fleming's mysteries and Ellie Griffith's Ruth Galloway series, those kind of stories where they're his and her points of view. I love those. So that's what I wanted to write. I wanted to write one of those. So I needed his point of view. I had Mercy, now I need his. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if she had to team up with a game warden and his search and rescue dog, Bear, Susie Bear, who's inspired by our own rescue dog, Bear. And I thought it would be fun to have that sort of boy, girl dynamic with the dogs and with Mercy and Troy. And, you know, Mercy is still grieving Martinez. She's reluctant to commit, but Troy is sort of irresistible. So hopefully he'll win out in the end.
Well, who knows?
I hope so too.
Only you know. But you know what? Let me add that it's, you almost have to have somebody like a game warden, somebody with some kind of enforcement capability in order for this to work. Because Mercy and Elvis, they can maybe investigate, but they can't arrest a bad guy or, you know, do anything like that. Margaret has a different mechanism going in her book, but unless you actually have a law professional as your protagonist, you're pretty much forced to bring somebody. I mean, you know, Holmes and Watson had Inspector Lestrade, Lord Peter had his brother-in-law, how convenient. You know, there's always somebody that, you know, Poirot had Inspector Japp and Miss Marple had her, I think it was her nephew. I remember right. But I mean, you just have to have somebody in a mystery at the end if you're going to have some sort of justice that is going to be able to do that, you know, to arrest people and haul them off, so to speak. So a game warden, I think, is for what you're wanting to write and where you want to write it seems like a natural rather than the local cop or something.
Exactly. I wanted to keep them in the woods as much as possible. And the game wardens are out there in the woods, in the wilderness.
Right.
So
That's right. Barbara, I did want to tell you that you're not the only one that had trouble with that K-9. When my books first came out in 2015, one of the librarians here locally was very confused and thought it should be shelved on the children's shelf because she thought it meant kindergarten through 9th grade.
You know, my whole problem was that I never said it aloud. You know, I mean, I just kept reading it and it just didn't register. And finally one day when I might have been talking to one of you, you know, and I said K9, and that's when like this light bulb went on and I thought, oh, for dumb.
absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. And some jurisdictions just do K9, they don't do K-9, but the jurisdiction that my consultant who helped me so much in the development of this robo character that I have in my books, she insisted now it's K-9, not K9, but I've seen it both ways.
Okay, right. So Paula, you chose a winter scene this time. I mean, I really like that. Of course, living in Phoenix, one tends to sort of long for winter. We actually had snow this year. It's unbelievable. I have a little photo of a slight snowdrift behind our swimming pool. There's this little teeny snowbank that probably lasted for like 20 minutes, but it honestly was so cold at one point and wet, which is a double unusual for the desert. That we had both. And, you know, I'm going to be interested to see if climate change progresses in such a way that maybe there is more winter, but certainly in Vermont and certainly in Colorado, you know, winter is I don't know how many, I grew up in Chicago, so, you know, I came from winter and I live here to escape it. But you're looking at what, 4 months anyway?
Yes, at least 4 months. Although I have to say, I spent a year in Chicago. When my first husband was in graduate school, we lived in Evanston, and I took the train down to the Loop every day to work. And that's the coldest I've ever been in my life.
I can well believe it. I grew up in Winnetka, and I did one of my master's degrees at Northwestern, and it was the year of the ice storm when the ice was so terrible on the suburbs and especially around the campus, because you know Northwestern, the campus is right on the lake. You could freeze walking from one class to another, that the trees would break. You know, the electric lines came down and the whole bit. That's when I thought, I'm just going to have to live somewhere else. I don't really want to do that, but it's more natural in the woods in Vermont and in Colorado. Where's Timber Creek exactly, Margaret? It's also in the mountains, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a fictional town, so it doesn't really exist. And I'm getting the message that my internet is unstable, so I may go ahead and take myself off video. Anyway, Timber Creek would be down around the Durango area. Maybe where Pagosa Springs is, kind of where South Fork is. That's kind of where I picture it.
Gotcha. You know what you could do is sign off and then ask Patrick to sign you back in. That might be a better way to go. It just happens. Paula, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
I'll
this
try
does
that.
happen, and it's actually probably oftentimes best to just sign off and then come back again. So
Here, I'm just asking her to start her video if that works.
okay, that'll be
Okay.
great. So anyway, Paula, I really like the fact that you wrote about Vermont in the winter. I mean, we think of New England, those of us who don't live there, maybe primarily for fall, for the magnificent colors and the whole bit, but I'm sure the beauty of it all in the winter is tremendous. But you bring somebody into this story that has been a potential threat to Mercy and to Elvis, and here he materializes in this book, and I thought that was really scary myself.
So are you talking about the former handler?
I am.
Yes. Well, you know, this does happen sometimes where a military working dog has finished their service, and then, you know, what happens to them then, right? Next. So if they're Army dogs, sometimes they try to find a former handler to take the dog, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't. And sometimes a family adopts them, whatever happens. And then the handler can show up, one of the dog's former handlers, and say, I would like the dog. And then you have this conflict. And I knew that happened in real life. So I thought it would make sense that it might happen to Mercy, where a former handler that she didn't know about, because she thought Martinez had been Elvis's only handler. And it turns out he'd had another handler, and that handler shows up and wants him back. So that's a huge, huge problem for Mercy, because she and Elvis have bonded so much in their grief, right? And in their transition to civilian life, that it's a real threat to her emotional and even physical well-being, the thought of losing Elvis.
Yeah, it's a custody dispute, essentially, without the same rules that might apply in a people dispute. Margaret, what did you think of that aspect of the story?
Oh, I thought it was a great subplot. And actually, we had a dispute similar to that here in Colorado, I would say maybe a year and a half ago, where a woman who found a dog thought it was her dog. She decided to keep the dog after she found it. The dog was chipped. They found the owner. She refused to give the dog up, had to go to court. And of course, the judge found that the owner who had chipped the dog was who should have the dog in this case, because he had had the dog for years before the dog got lost. But she still refused to give it up. And I really don't know the outcome of that case, but it really reminded me of all of that, Paula. My heart was in my throat because it was like, oh no, she can't give up Elvis. Mm-mm. So, and I really love the way you worked it out in the end, which we won't talk about, but I did really love it. So
there's yet another what am I going to say here? Another character, that's the word I want. Another character who comes into the book, a really lovely dog. I like this. So you're introducing two new people, or, for all intents and purposes, the dog is the person. So we have the handler, but, and if I remember right, Mercy is somewhat on the outs with Troy and Susie Bear due to events in a previous book, which we don't want to talk about and spoil. So did you like this? Tell us about this dog and the breed, because it's a different breed. And I thought you probably had a lot of fun with it.
Well, I did, because, it's a dog, a golden retriever named Sunny, who's in the book, who makes her first appearance in this book. And it's funny because everybody loves golden retrievers. And you cannot, shake a stick at a dog park without a million golden retrievers, and they're happy, happy owners. So one of my friends, Jerry Johnson from Vermont, he's a poet. He raises Goldens. He loves Goldens. And he kept saying to me, why aren't there any Goldens in your book? And I said, well, lots of people, David Rosenfeld, there are a lot of people writing about Goldens, So I didn't write about Goldens. I chose Malinois and Newfoundlands and other breeds. He goes, oh, but you have to have a Golden. And it just so happened that in this book, in The Hiding Place, I needed a very empathetic, friendly, lovely, dog, who I call Sunny in the book. I call her the mood ring of dogs, because she senses your emotions and comes to help you, So I needed a dog like that for the purposes of the plot, and a Golden really fit the bill. So in comes Sunny, the golden retriever, named after one of Jerry Johnson's beloved Goldens. So all the golden retriever people, they finally got their Golden in a Mercy Carr book, and she was perfect casting, a golden retriever.
Yeah, she was. I just enjoyed her character so much. And my daughter just adopted a little dog out of Mexico, actually, a rescue that brings dogs in from Mexico, and his name is Sunny. So I was so happy to see Sunny in a book, and perfect name for that dog.
Yes, perfect name. Lovely dog.
Yes.
So
people.
Excuse me, I was just going to say, we're going to be talking to David Rosenfeld tomorrow at 4 o'clock Pacific. No, this is our week to go to the dogs, as I've written it up. But one of the fun things to talk when talking to David is the dogs are all around him. They're, because most of them are rescue dogs and a lot of them are quite elderly. So you talk to David and there'll be a tail wagging and there'll be a head that appears. And then you look over his shoulder and there are shapes on the floor. And, it's really nice. When he's at the store, there's a Golden Rescue Society here that he raises money for. And they come with their dogs. We actually have had to call the exterminator after the event at least once. And then David, when he lived in California, he would adopt one. He would always adopt one on the floor at the store and drive it back. He drove over and he would do his event with me, and the society would come. And then he would adopt one of the dogs and he would drive it away. Which he can do now that he's in Maine. And I really miss that, because it was lovely, to see that.
Well, he's great. And David Rosenfeld and Carolyn Haynes, who also writes Cozy Mysteries, both of them have rescues. He has his Golden rescue in Maine now. He's got all those dogs that he's rescued. And then Carolyn has a rescue ranch with horses and dogs and cats. And, Margaret, there's some pressure. The more books you write, of course, you live with a veterinarian, so you do your part. But I told my husband when the pandemic came, I said, we have to adopt a dog per book, I think, because, that's what these dog writers do. They all rescue dogs. We have to keep up. So
yeah,
you'll have
I know you'll have book book and dog number 4 soon.
Right.
Well, you mentioned before, Paula, that Susie Bear was inspired by your dog Bear. So tell us a little bit more about Bear.
Oh, Bear is lovely. I call Susie Bear the happiest dog in the world because Bear, her inspiration, is the happiest dog in the world. He's a Newfoundland Retriever mix, big black shaggy dog, just loves you, loves life, wakes up happy. He's just the sweetest dog in the world. He really is. And so I thought when I had to give, I wanted 2 very different kinds of dogs, and Elvis is a Malinois, military working dog, bomb sniffing dog, highly trained, fierce. These are fierce dogs, and elegant dogs. We have now a Malinois mix that we got during the pandemic, which is like having a living, breathing Elvis in the house. It's so awesome. And she's the same way. She's fierce and elegant and loyal. And Susie Bear is like Bear, is just this big lump of a happy dog, So they're very different kinds of dogs. And so I like that contrast between the 2 different kinds of dogs.
And then we throw the golden retriever into the mix, then it's really a mix. Wow.
Exactly.
Like you said, big dogs. Big dogs for sure.
Big dogs, yeah.
Yes. Well, what can you tell us about the hiding place? What can you tell us so we don't give any spoilers out to your readers?
Well, it's funny because I started the book and I knew 2 things about the book. One, I had the title because when I wrote Blind Search, the book before, I had a terrible title and I don't remember what it was, but it was really bad. So bad the publisher hated it. So they said, come up with a list of titles. So I came up with a list of 100 titles because I knew if I didn't get one that I liked, they would pick one that I hated. So 100 titles, and the publisher loved Blind Search, which I did too. But the editorial director liked The Hiding Place. And so my editor says, okay, so the next book's called The Hiding Place. Like, okay, so I'm going to write a book called The Hiding Place. And then my editor said to me, we knew that Mercy's grandfather had been a sheriff and he had been killed in the line of duty. That's all we really knew about him, That's all I knew about him. But he said, she should do a cold case, one of her grandfather's cold cases.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a cold case, and I knew it was going to be called The Hiding Place. And I sort of ran from there. Yes. And it allowed me to dig into Mercy Carr's family, buried scandals, and the man who killed her grandfather breaks out of prison and comes after her grandmother, Patience, who is Mercy's favorite human.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But even the thought of that just sends a chill because my goodness, here's this grandmother who she's spry. I mean, she's spry, she's in good shape, but she's older. And that sends a chill to even think about it. And it certainly did with Mercy too. Yes.
Absolutely. She, in this book, she faces losing her grandmother and Elvis, who are the 2 sentient beings she counts on most for love and support and compassion and advice. So for her, they're her favorite sentient beings. So the thought of living without either of them, the two people and dog that she thinks understands her best, she loves them so much that that's the real threat to her. She's threatened with losing the dog and the grandmother, and grandmothers rock, so we don't want to lose our grandmothers.
No,
there has to be a crime in the present. I mean, we're talking. Sorry, Margaret. I lost you.
I think we lost.
No, go ahead, Barbara.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say that that's the background, but we still need to have some crime going on in the present. I mean, the guy gets out of prison and he is coming after her grandmother, but doesn't something else happen that drives the story forward?
Yes. The
hint of it.
Yes. Well, it opens with this sheriff, that her grandfather's deputy's dying, and he calls her to his deathbed and he says, this is the cold case that haunted your grandfather. and it's haunted me. You solve it now. You find this missing girl who disappeared 20 years before. So that's the first. And then, of course, there are other murders along the way, you know, dead bodies that show up while she's trying to find this missing girl and keep her grandmother safe.
Got it. So do you think that The Hiding Place is a wonderful book, and you can read it all by yourself. Do you think, since it's only book 3, that you would recommend that people who haven't read you before start at the beginning and work their way towards it?
Well, I think like most series, you know, it stands alone. You can read it, you know, but I know when I find a series I love, and I often find a series I love by reading a later book in the series, right? You come to, but then I go back and read them all because I want to know how that works. Like whether it's Margaret or Louise Penny or Ellie Griffiths or, you know, any of the wonderful series writers we have, Craig Johnson, there's so many, Julia Spencer Fleming, Attica Locke, you know, I go back and read them all. And I think that's what most readers like to do. So I'd say, you know, I'd love you to read all my books, of course, but I think, and reading them in order is fun, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. You know?
No, it isn't. But when you only have 3 books as compared to, like, you know, finding you at book 11, it's not quite so daunting. Now, Margaret, how many Timber Creek mysteries have you written? It's quite a few now.
Yes, we have 6 out, and like we talked about earlier, the 7th Striking Range comes out this coming September. So there will be 7, and I'll be starting number 8 very soon.
Wonderful. Well, you've been you've been right there, 1 book a year, doing extremely well, disciplined like Paula. So tell us a little bit about Timber Creek and about your series for people who don't know it.
Well, it's set in the Colorado Rockies, and Timber Creek, fictional town, is surrounded by wilderness areas. So there is a lot of outdoor action. We have Deputy Maddie Cobb, who is the heroine, and her German Shepherd, Robo, who is her canine partner. And then the love interest and the secondary character, just like Paula, I wanted to play that male-female love interest point of view back and forth, is Cole Walker, and he's a veterinarian. I've been married to a vet almost 40 years. So I have watched my husband work many, many times, and it's been fascinating whenever I go on barn calls with him, because everybody wants to come and watch him work. And I had hoped that people would enjoy watching Cole Walker work in a book. And so Cole always has some part of solving and investigating the case. Something that has to do with animals will come out. It'll either be a clue or maybe even an integral part of the mystery. But like Paula, my 4th book, Burning Ridge, I wrote that to title also. And we did it the very same way. It's so funny. That's the very same story in trying to come up with a title for Hunting Hour, which was book 3. Burning Ridge was thrown out there and it didn't fit that book, but it was kind of like, okay, let's have that be book 4. And that was really fun. Didn't you find it really fun to write to title?
I think it's great. I'm writing book 4 now and I don't have a title. I wish I did.
I know. But I'm determined to come up with a title, because I also had a really hard time coming up with Striking Range. We had chosen a title very similar to C.J. Box's latest book. His book is, I think, called Dark Sky.
Yeah, big Dark Sky, and then Long Range before that. Yeah.
Okay, so we had come up with a title that was very similar because we didn't know what his title was going to be yet. And so when we saw that come out, we decided to change our title because it doesn't come out until September. And we came up with Striking Range, but I was like you, I had to submit 20 titles in order for us to find the one that just really seemed to fit the book. And it's all about the killer being close enough to be within striking range to kill his victims. So
great title.
Yeah.
Oh, that seems to work extremely well. So you've got a different thing. Paula has got Mercy, who is not in law enforcement, and Troy, who is a game warden. But you have got Maddie is the person in law enforcement, and then Cole, the veterinarian, is not. And
Right.
so you guys are not only doing the, male, female back and forth thing, but you're doing the, the professional and the law enforcement professional and then the other professional. I mean, the other professional carries weight in his or her, in both cases, in his profession. I mean, he's a vet or he's a game warden. So, he's not just like wallpaper or anything. And so those skills can be helpful in the actual investigation by the person in law enforcement. So it's a nice pairing.
So Paula and I decided that our male characters would not just be a pretty face, right?
The face belongs to the dogs. Come on. Yeah.
They actually have to have jobs to do. And kind of similar to my husband, Cole Walker has been collecting dogs through the series. So they are at 2 now in their family. But he also collected a cat or a kitten in Hanging Falls. So they're building the animals up in his home.
So you guys are, working not actual wilderness, but sort of, out there in Mother Nature and whatever it is. And so you need working dogs, and working dogs have to be pretty good size. So, that's why we have the Malinois and the German Shepherd and the, and the other big dogs. I'm used to this little dog that I showed you before we started, and I don't know what I would do with a big dog, at least here. Although it could hold its own against coyotes. We have to have walls because of our swimming pools. The law requires you, if you have a swimming pool, you have to have a wall around it. But you also want a wall because we are still, there's the possibility of coyotes who can leap tall walls at a single bound. And if you have a little dog. And my friend Dana Stabenow, who lives in, the wilds of Alaska now, points out that if you have a small dog, it's in serious danger from birds of prey. She had a neighbor who had a little dog, and an eagle, one day arrived, and so small dogs have a different set of hazards to face than big dogs. And I find it really interesting to read about your big dogs, because my whole experience is little dogs.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean she's not that little. She's 24 pounds, I mean, it's not like she's tiny, but I think caring for a big dog, do you have to groom them a lot, especially your big furry dog?
Well, I take them to, until the pandemic, of course, they went to the groomers, and then they get summer cuts, because they just get too hot. Bear especially gets too hot. The Newfoundland, he has a really thick coat. But in terms of getting them enough exercise, we didn't have any trouble with Bear, because Newfoundlands, they can sort of entertain themselves. And then we have another rescue, Bliss, who's a Great Pyrenees shepherd mix, and Great Pyrenees are notoriously lazy dogs, and she's always on a diet, and we're always trying to get her to move more, because she would just as soon, Great Pyrenees, they're shepherds, right? But they just guard the sheep. They don't actually run around, and all she wants to do is like guard the yard and bark, and eat. It's all she wants to do. So I didn't have to worry about too much. But then we got this Malinois mix, Blondie, and she is the most athletic dog we have ever had. She is unbelievable. So we are in the process right now of designing an agility course for her, now that spring is within sight, so that really keep her busy doing things.
Excellent. That's great. We do have a border collie who has to be groomed pretty frequently, and she is so energetic and active. And because we have cattle, she also works. So she goes up to the vet clinic with my husband and spends her day up there. And so we have her, Tess, beautiful black and white border collie. And then we have 2 German short-haired pointers, and they don't require much grooming at all, just a little bit of a rubber brush to get the loose hair out. But yeah.
I was interested to read not long ago, and I don't know why it never had occurred to me to figure out what dog Spencer in the Robert Parker series has, probably generation 4. And it turns out that it is a German short-haired pointer. I don't know, for some reason, I always kind of thought it was like a golden or something, but no, but it's not. So fascinating stuff. Our dog goes to doggy daycare 4 days a week.
Oh, fun.
Well, they have, dog gyms and runs and all the rest of it, and she has her own dog door in a big yard with a wall, and she hates water, so we never worry about her drowning in the pool. But she chases rabbits. So far she's never caught one, and our hope is she never will, because she wouldn't have any idea what to do with it. But boy, she just out after the bunnies, and there are a lot of them this spring, so it keeps her really busy. Very high energy dog, which, considering how old my husband and I are, that's a good thing she can do all that. I don't know what we would do. Lord, so Patrick, you want to come back up from the deep and see if we have any questions or comments from people?
Sure.
And Patrick actually had a lovely dog who, if I remember right, is a Greyhound rescue dog.
He's
So
a Greyhound, yeah.
different experience there.
We've been thinking about getting another one. But yeah, they're just beautiful, beautiful dogs, very gentle. Ours was a total couch potato.
Really?
Yeah, I think she figured, she'd done her time. She was
Yeah.
a racer.
She was
And,
retired.
she was, I think they're used to, 23 hours in their crate and then 1 hour of showtime. So she would run around our backyard and do laps and stuff. Yeah. No, great dog. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Yeah. Grace has a question. Was there an unsolved missing person case that was the inspiration for the subplot involving Beth?
Well, that's interesting. I did have an idea that was sort of, I don't want to give too much away, but there was a case in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is where I live, southern New Hampshire, just 40 miles from Vermont. So I'm getting closer to Vermont, but I live in New Hampshire. And there was a case where, New Hampshire has like the lowest violent crime rate in the country, one of the very lowest. And when this discovery was found, these dead bodies were found, I won't say any more because we'll give too much away. We lost a whole ranking. So we went from being like the least violent to this, just because there's so few murders in New Hampshire, that just finding these dead bodies, which have been there apparently for years and years in the woods. There are a lot of bodies out there in the woods. There's like 80,000 unknown remains, where we don't know who they are, and then that we found. And then there's even more estimated that they're just buried out there in the woods somewhere that nobody has found. So that's kind of the inspiration, that case, and the fact that there are all these bodies out there,
Right.
Why are they out there?
Because nobody finds them, unless they're gone and you know where they've gone. That's why dogs are so great, because dogs can find what people can't,
Right.
And otherwise you wouldn't know. You don't know where they were last seen. It's a great place to hide a body because nobody's out there.
So is it kind of a dumping ground for like Boston and New York or something? Is that really what it is?
Yes, well, up along the Appalachian Trail, there's a lot of bodies, that we have found and haven't found. I'm sure it's true in the Colorado Rockies. It was also true in Santa Cruz, in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I used to live in Santa Cruz years ago, and Santa Cruz was known at the time as the myrtle capital of the world because they kept finding all these dead bodies in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it's just a good place to hide a body.
Yeah.
Okay. I would never have thought of New Hampshire in that context. I'm fascinated. Wow.
Well, Vermont is 80% woods, and so is New Hampshire. So it's so much of it is just woods.
Wow. Let's see. A lot of people are just checking in and saying how much they love your work, both of you. There is, let's see, Debbie asks, how did you research how working dogs do their jobs and how their handler sorry, this isn't a very clear question, is it? The gist of it, how did you research the how they interact with their handlers, I think is what she's trying to say here.
Well, I know Margaret's probably done the same thing. She's already talked about her expert or consultant, but I've just talked to so many handlers and their dogs. You know, I have a fabulous Vermont game warden named Rob Sterling. They have the best names, you know, and they're all handsome. Rob Sterling, who's a Vermont game warden, he's had several dogs. So I've talked to him, I've met him, I've met their dogs. Like I said, at that Mission Canine Rescue fundraiser, I met all these dogs and all these handlers, all different kinds of dogs. So there are just so many different kinds of dogs. And then there's also a fabulous woman who runs the New England Search and Rescue Volunteer Corps. And that's made up of volunteers, just regular civilians and their dogs. They train for 2 years. And then whenever someone gets lost in the woods, there's never enough people, you know, because New England is such a big place, so much of it's remote, some of it's woods. If somebody gets lost, there's never enough people to look, right? So they train their dogs as volunteers and they go out and help on all these search and rescues. So I've just talked to all these people and met their dogs and, you know, see what I could find out.
How about you, Margaret?
Well, so back in the day, I think we were in our 30s, our children were quite young. My husband and I decided to train our dogs in search and rescue because a toddler had gotten lost near where we live and was found too late. And so we decided that in case one of our daughters wandered around from our campground, we would have a dog that could find her. And so we trained with the county search and rescue group. And so I learned so much valuable information about nose work and what kind of tracking and trailing dogs can do. And then of course, friends who are patrol officers or narcotics detection officers have let me shadow them. And then there's another way you can do some research that's wonderful. There are regional canine competitions in various parts of the country, and you can go and see 50 to 100 dogs compete with each other in all the different types of skills, and you can watch their behaviors and see how they interact with their handlers. So another great way to get some research done.
Wow. It's funny, there are a lot of people, you know, there's something to be said about animal lovers in general. A lot of the comments are just people talking about their dogs, you know, how much they love their dogs. Let's see, Grace says, is there a story behind the name choice you used for Mercy, her mother and grandmother?
Yes, so in New England, there's a long tradition of virtue names. So especially among, you know, Amish and certain religious groups. And so I wanted them to have virtue names. So that's the tradition in their family that all the women get virtue names. So Mercy, and then her mother's name is Grace, and her grandmother's name is Patience. So I just love those names, and I love the idea of virtue names, and it's such a New England thing that I thought it really worked well.
It does. It does.
Do the people think they have to live up to their names?
You know, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think names really affect, right? I mean, how many writers do we know, like Francine Prose, and, you know, and she grows up to be a great writer. So I think that maybe this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, hopefully, right?
Or they'll be the exact opposite, right?
Well, yeah, there's always that.
Oh boy, I just had a good one too. Okay, well, actually, Barbara, there's one for you.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's about where you grew up. Somebody who grew up in Winnetka, and I just want to see if I can find it. Yeah. Elizabeth wants to know, did you go to New Trier High School?
I went to New Trier High School, class of 1958. You betcha.
Oh, wow.
And she says,
I also went to Crow Island School and Skokie School, Skokie Junior High.
Exactly what she said. So maybe you know this person.
Yep, I might. We lived on Elm Street, so right across from Skokie. and then went to New Trier for 4 years, and that was back when they were building New Trier West, because the baby boom after the war. I was born in 1940, so I wasn't part of the baby boom, but it came after us. And New Trier was a fabulous, the whole school system in Winnetka was one of the best in the whole country. I think 80 or 99% of New Trier graduates went to college. I mean, a phenomenal percentage. And it was
Elizabeth
a great place.
lived on
There's
Pine
now
Street.
a New Trier High School Foundation, and I donate money to it, and it's quite active. And my husband went to a prep school in the East, and they're very active also. But I think it's great that not just colleges, but preparatory schools, high schools, whatever, are making an effort to reach out to their alumni and do various interesting support activities and so forth. I missed my 60th high school reunion. I can't remember why. I know why. It's because we were in Eastern Europe on the Danube with the kids and Laurie King when it came along, and I couldn't manage to get back. Was this somebody that I knew? It was probably somebody
I don't
much
know.
younger.
I don't know if I guess it's okay if I say her name. She said she lived on Pine Street.
Oh, sure. I know where Pine is. Right. Winnetka had loads of trees. I mean, loads of streets named for trees. Ash, cherry, oak, elm. It was at Willow. It went Willow. Willow, ash, cherry, oak, and Elm Street, and then spruce behind me. And then, I don't know why.
All right, I'll just say, Elizabeth, is it okay if I say your last name? And she'll tell me.
Sure.
But question wise, okay, from start to approved manuscript to publication, how long does it take?
Forever.
It varies every book.
What, Paula? We're looking at 6 to 12 months.
Yes, I mean, the old adage used to be, it takes 9 months to make a baby, it takes 9 months to make a book, once it goes into production. So that means once you have a manuscript that's good to go, it takes 9 months. And it's not a business for impatient people. It's a business for patience and perseverance and hard work. I mean, it's a lot harder, I think, than most people give credit for. And of course, publishing is also a slim margin business. So it's, kind of risk averse and all those things. I could go on and on. I spent 30 years in publishing between being an acquisitions editor and an agent and an author. So I've sat at every seat at the table, and it's a big table and it's a great table, but it's not for the faint of heart.
It's true of book selling too, I might add.
Yes, absolutely.
Very thin margin, right? But I'm not temperamentally risk averse, as Patrick will testify. So we've actually done an awful lot of very risky things over the years, which might be one reason we're still here at year 31. I mean, you have to make a choice at some point between standing still and not jumping over a cliff, and you have to hope to pilot your horse and be fortunate.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're the perfect example of a bookseller who just made her own way and did, and like a beacon for everybody else. And anybody who didn't pay attention, they probably suffered. They should have been doing what you were doing. And you've.
A lot of it depends on community. Honestly, every bookstore reflects its community and its staff. And it's a combination. And we are not a local bookstore. I mean, we are an international bookstore, and it's because Scottsdale was not a residential city, and most of the people that came to see us in our early informative years didn't live here. And so we naturally progressed into that kind of an outreach. We used to write newsletters and send out printed order forms, and people would send checks, and the fax machine would whir and the whole bit. And it just, because that's how downtown Scottsdale was. And I think there are unfortunately a lot of people who start bookstores with a design in mind that does not fit the place that they put it. It's just, they don't mesh. And you really have to cut your cloth to suit that place. So we're fortunate that it all worked out that way.
It's a great.
Patrick, you want to add to that? I mean, you've been here almost as long as I have, very few years fewer. So what would your take on that be?
Well, I mean, I think we are also a local bookstore too. I mean, it's kind of a mix of both.
Yeah.
Juggling that, we have a real strong local community here, and I don't know. It's just
Well,
been,
it's much more local than it used to be because downtown Scottsdale has evolved into much more of a residential city than it was. Condos and urban, all the rest of it is quite different than it was when we started out.
right.
I mean, I first came to Arizona in 1950. There were 2 paved roads in Scottsdale that met at a T, and the city wasn't even incorporated. I mean, so in 70 years, it's totally transformed. I don't even recognize it, from the way it was at the very beginning. So, you have to allow for that. And Patrick's right, we have fabulous local customers. I'm just saying that when we started, it was less so. And then it's kind of evolved in that direction.
We're
We
in a very
really have missed them.
touristy area.
Huh?
We're in a very touristy area too.
We
So,
are. But
yeah.
in essence, we were able to reopen the store because virtually everybody now on staff is vaccinated, and we've done that. It's really wonderful to see people pouring back in. It's also interesting to see the buying patterns change, because the thing that suffered the most in the past year were the paperback sales. People were not paying to ship paperbacks all over. And so now that we're open again, did you notice that, Patrick, when I do the restock and reorders, the paperbacks are really moving again.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what people tend to pick up when they're browsing.
Right.
So it's a whole different rhythm that has come back that we missed over the last year. And we'll see how that goes.
Well, also, like you started doing these kinds of events long before.
1995 was our very first one. Yep, we've been doing them forever. And people say, what are you going to do when it's over? We say, well, we're going to just carry on like we have been. We videoed all our events that were live on Facebook, and now we're doing it this way. But the great thing is we can now do more events because it's not practical it would have been something of a challenge to get your 2 publishers to bring you both to Scottsdale for this event tonight. Bring you in from New Hampshire or Margaret in from Colorado wouldn't make a lot of economic sense for a publisher. So we can do these things, and we can do international author events. So I think that we are going to be better off at the end of this horrible, deal with this technology. We'll be able to do a lot more things than we were able to do before it came along. But yes, we were completely prepared for it. Very lucky. Patrick has taken huge strides. He's like, the producer back there. So he's had the burden of learning the technology. I just keep talking, but Patrick is the one who's really had to learn to do an awful lot of a whole new skill set. And he's been great at it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, I mean, a lot of these events, as I always say, they take on, sometimes the conversations take on a slightly different tone than they might, if you have a full audience in front of you, which is fun. It's just a different energy. So I hope that eventually we'll be able to do a combination of both.
Oh yeah, I mean, we really miss having people in the store, all that energy and fun, and I don't want to give that up, but I don't want to throw out the good things that have come
absolutely
with the Zoom event, and so we'll see how it goes. Is there anything else that people would like to ask? Or
well, the lady in question is Elizabeth Nichols, and I told her or suggested that she drop you an email, Barbara. You guys can talk about it. She said her parents lived there. How about yours? My
mother went to New Trier, but my parents met at Northwestern. So, and I'm having dinner next week with one of my oldest friends who went through Skokie Junior High in New Trier with me, and it's here visiting. So there we are. It's good to outlive,
awesome.
I know
Yeah.
it is. So I want to thank our two authors. It's so great to see you both. I wish you were here, but I'm so pleased that we could do it this way. And it was a nice thing to have you two canine experts together.
Yo,
So
Thank
maybe,
you.
we should try to get up, you know what, it'd be fun. We should try to get up a group of more books with dogs and so forth and we can do a
Sure.
dog-oriented book event, which would be a lot of
Dog
fun.
and pony show, right? Dog and pony
Yeah,
show.
no, why not? I think it'd be great. Anyway, thank you, ladies, very
Thank
much. There
you.
will be a podcast for
Thank
this
you.
available probably tomorrow. So I will send you the links, and any of you watching this will remain on our Facebook page, video page forever. So you can recommend it to your friends or recommend that they go to our podcast page and download the podcast. And I will remind you that we have a few signed copies left of The Hiding Place and a few signed copies left of Margaret's most recent book. And we will look forward to seeing Margaret in September. So thank you all very much. Night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
thanks everybody for watching on Facebook.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.